The iron bar slammed down 6 inches from his hand. Chuck didn't flinch. The weight room at Garcia's gym had gone silent, except for the hum of the overhead fans and the heavy breathing of the man standing over him. The smell of old sweat and rubber mats hung thick in the air. Chuck was mid-set on the bench press, 315 pounds suspended above his chest, when the shadow fell across his face. He'd seen the guy before. Everyone had. Diesel Marquez. 6'4", 260 pounds of prison muscle and cartel connections. The kind of man who'd earned his nickname in Pelican Bay by ripping a cell door off its hinges during a riot. He wore a white tank top stained with sweat and a gold chain thick enough to tow a truck. His arms were covered in jailhouse tattoos, crude black ink spelling out names of dead brothers and territories claimed. Chuck finished his rep. Slow, controlled. The bar touched his chest, and he pressed it back up with the same mechanical precision he'd used for 40 years. Diesel didn't move. His breath smelled like cigarettes and rage. Chuck racked the weight and sat up, reaching for his towel. That's when Diesel kicked the bench. The metal screeched across the concrete floor. Every head in the gym turned. The college kids on the ellipticals stopped mid-stride. The old-timers by the free weights pretended to adjust their grips, but everyone was watching. Violence has a frequency. You can feel it building in the air like static before a lightning strike. Chuck wiped his face with the towel and stood. He was shorter than Diesel by half a foot and probably 40 pounds lighter. He wore a faded grey t-shirt and black gym shorts. His boots were old Wolverines with the laces double knotted. His hair was streaked with silver, but his eyes were still that cold blue that made men look away. Diesel stepped closer. His boys flanked him. 3 of them. Young bucks trying to prove something. One had a teardrop tattoo under his left eye. Another wore a Raiders jersey and had his hand tucked in his waistband. The third was jumpy, his eyes darting between Chuck and the exit like he wasn't sure he wanted to be there. Diesel spoke first. His voice was gravel and diesel fuel. "You don't know who I am, old man." Chuck folded the towel and set it on the bench. "I know exactly who you are. You're the guy interrupting my workout." The gym was a pressure cooker now. Someone's phone started recording. Diesel's jaw clenched. He wasn't used to being talked back to. In his world, respect was currency and disrespect was paid in blood. You got a smart mouth for someone about to get his teeth kicked in. Chuck didn't answer. He was already calculating distances. Diesel was 7 feet away, too close for a sprint, too far for a quick takedown. The kid with the teardrop was 5 feet to the left, hand near his pocket. Raiders' jersey was blocking the exit. The jumpy one was drifting toward the weight rack, probably looking for something to grab. Chuck's hands hung loose at his sides. His pulse was steady at 60 beats per minute. He'd been in worse situations. Much worse. The thing about bullies is they operate on fear. They need you to flinch, to stammer, to beg. When you don't, their entire script falls apart. Diesel took another step. "You think because you got some reputation you can disrespect me in my neighborhood? This is my gym, old man. This is my block." Chuck's voice was flat and quiet. "This gym belongs to Maria Garcia. You're just renting space, that did it." Diesel swung. It was a haymaker, telegraphed from a mile away. All that prison muscle made him strong, but it also made him slow. Chuck slipped left, just enough. The fist whiffed past his ear with enough force to dislocate a jaw if it had landed. Chuck's counter was surgical, a short right hook to the floating ribs, not the head, not yet. Ribs break easier and hurt longer. Diesel grunted and staggered back. His boys surged forward. The one with the teardrop pulled a knife, 4 inches of serrated steel, probably taken off a dead rival. The jumpy kid grabbed a 25-pound plate. Raiders' jersey pulled a snub-nose 38 from his waistband. The entire equation changed in 2 seconds. This wasn't a fistfight anymore. This was lethal force in play. Chuck moved before the gun fully cleared the waistband. He closed the distance to Raiders in 3 strides, his left hand clamping down on the wrist, holding the revolver, his right driving an elbow into the kid's temple. The gun clattered to the floor. Chuck kicked it under the leg press machine and spun just as Teardrop lunged with the knife. The kid was fast but sloppy. Street fighter, not a soldier. Chuck caught the knife hand at the wrist, stepped inside the arc of the blade and drove his knee into the kid's liver. The liver shot is one of the most underrated strikes in hand-to-hand combat. It shuts the body down instantly. Teardrop folded like a cheap tent, the knife falling from his fingers. Chuck kicked it away and turned to face the jumpy kid with the weight plate. The kid threw it. 25 pounds of iron spinning end over end like a discus. Chuck ducked and the plate sailed past him, crashing into a mirror that spiderwebbed into 1,000 fractures. The kid turned to run. Chuck let him go. No point chasing someone who'd already quit. That left Diesel. The big man had recovered from the rib shot and was charging like a bull, all momentum and rage. Chuck sidestepped at the last second, grabbed a fistful of the tank top, and used Diesel's own forward motion against him. Basic judo principle. Diesel crashed face first into the bench press station, the metal bar catching him across the forehead. Blood streamed down his face. He roared and swung a wild backhand. Chuck blocked it with his forearm, the impact sending a shockwave up to his shoulder. Diesel was strong, stronger than most men Chuck had fought, but strength without discipline is just noise. Chuck drove a palm strike into Diesel's nose. Cartilage crunched. The big man stumbled back, blood pouring from both nostrils now. Chuck didn't let up. He swept Diesel's leg and the giant went down hard, the concrete floor shaking under his weight. Chuck dropped a knee onto his chest, pinning him. His forearm pressed against Diesel's throat, not enough to choke him out, just enough to make breathing a conscious effort. The entire fight had lasted 23 seconds. The gym was still silent. Phones were recording from 6 different angles. Chuck leaned close, his voice low enough that only Diesel could hear. "You are going to walk out of here. You're going to take your boys and you're not coming back, because if you do, I won't be this nice." Diesel's eyes were wide with something he hadn't felt in a long time. Fear. Chuck stood and backed away. Diesel rolled onto his side, coughing and gasping. His boys helped him to his feet. They shuffled toward the exit, leaving a trail of blood drops on the rubber mats. The jumpy kid was already long gone. Chuck picked up his towel and wiped the blood off his knuckles. Maria Garcia emerged from her office, a tiny woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and a baseball bat in her hands. She'd been ready to jump in if things went south. "You okay, Chuck?" He nodded. "Just finishing my workout." The college kids went back to their ellipticals. The old-timers resumed their sets. The gym returned to its normal rhythm. But something had shifted. Respect is earned in increments, but it's solidified in moments like this. Chuck finished his workout, 5 more sets of bench, 3 sets of deadlifts, 20 minutes on the heavy bag. His body was a weapon, and like any weapon, it required maintenance. After the shower, he dressed in jeans and a black Henley, grabbed his gym bag, and walked out into the late afternoon heat. The Texas sun was a hammer, and the asphalt was an anvil. His truck was parked under the only tree in the lot, a scraggly mesquite that provided about as much shade as a cocktail umbrella. He tossed his bag in the bed and was about to climb in when he saw the black Escalade idling across the street. Tinted windows, custom rims, exhaust rumbling like a caged animal. Chuck didn't need to see inside to know who it belonged to. The back window rolled down. A man in his 50s leaned out. He wore a white guayabera and aviator sunglasses. His hair was slicked back, and his smile revealed a gold tooth. His name was Victor Salazar, and he owned half the legitimate businesses on this side of town and all of the illegitimate ones. Diesel worked for him. So did about 50 other men with violent resumes. Victor spoke in lightly accented English. "Mr. Norris, I heard there was some trouble at the gym." Chuck leaned against his truck. "Your boy started it." Victor nodded slowly. "Diesel is." "How do you say?" "Enthusiastic. But he is loyal." "Loyalty is valuable in my line of work." Chuck said nothing. He'd dealt with men like Victor before, cartel adjacent, too smart to get their hands dirty, but always close enough to the blood to smell it. Victor continued, "I respect what you did. Discipline, control, these are rare qualities, but you embarrassed one of my men in front of many witnesses. There are consequences for such things." Chuck straightened. His hand rested casually on his belt buckle, inches from the Glock 19 concealed under his shirt. "If you're here to make threats, Victor, you should know I don't respond well to them." Victor laughed. It was a genuine sound, warm even. "No threats, my friend. I am here to offer you a job." Chuck raised an eyebrow. "I'm retired." Victor shrugged. "Everyone says they are retired until the right offer comes along. I need someone with your skill set. There is a situation. Delicate. High risk. The kind of thing that requires a man who does not scare easily. Chuck crossed his arms. What kind of situation? Victor glanced around, making sure no one was within earshot. My daughter. She has been taken. Kidnapped. 3 days ago. The police are useless. The FBI is worse. These men, they are professionals. They want $5 million or she dies. I will pay the money, but I need someone to make sure she comes home alive. Someone who understands violence. Chuck studied Victor's face. The man was scared. Genuinely scared. That kind of fear is hard to fake. Why me? Victor removed his sunglasses. His eyes were bloodshot and haunted. Because you are a ghost, Mr. Norris. You move through violence like it is air. You do not hesitate. And most importantly, you cannot be bought. The men who took my daughter, they have people everywhere. Police, politicians, even my own organization. I need someone outside the system, someone they will not see coming. Chuck considered this. He'd walked away from the life years ago. The black ops, the wet work. The nights that ended with blood under his fingernails and ghosts in his rearview mirror. But the truth was, retirement had never really suited him. He was a weapon, and weapons rust when they're not used. How much time do I have? Victor's jaw tightened. They call again in 18 hours. If I do not have the money ready, they will send me her finger. Chuck nodded slowly. Get in the truck. We'll talk details. Victor climbed out of the Escalade and slid into the passenger seat of Chuck's F-150. The truck was old, but meticulously maintained. Leather seats worn smooth, a rosary hanging from the rearview mirror next to a faded photo of a woman with kind eyes. Victor noticed the photo but didn't ask. Chuck started the engine and pulled out of the lot. Where are we going? Victor asked. To get some answers. You said these guys are professionals. That means they're organized. Organization means patterns. Patterns mean vulnerabilities. Victor looked confused. I do not understand. Chuck turned onto the highway, heading east toward the border. You will. They drove in silence for 20 minutes, the landscape shifting from strip malls and fast food joints to scrubland and mesquite. The sun was sinking toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of rust and blood. Chuck pulled off onto a dirt road that led to an old trailer surrounded by chain-link fence. Guard dogs barked from inside the compound. A sign on the gate read, "Trespassers will be shot. Survivors will be shot again." Victor eyed the sign nervously. Who lives here? Chuck killed the engine. A friend. They got out and approached the gate. A man emerged from the trailer. He was in his 70s, skin like tanned leather, white beard down to his chest. He wore cargo pants and a Hawaiian shirt. An AR-15 hung from a sling across his chest. His eyes were sharp and clear. Chuck. Been a while. The old man grinned. Heard you retired. Chuck smiled. I did. This is just a favor. The old man looked at Victor and his grin faded. Cartel? Victor stiffened, but Chuck answered. His daughter was taken. Professional job. I need intel. The old man scratched his beard. Come on in. But your friend stays outside the fence, no offense. Victor started to protest, but Chuck cut him off. Wait here. I'll be back. Chuck followed the old man into the trailer. Inside, it was chaos. Maps covered every wall. Surveillance photos, satellite imagery, laptops humming with encryption software. The old man poured 2 glasses of bourbon and handed one to Chuck. His name was Elias Grant, former Delta Force, former CIA, former everything. Now he ran an off-the-books intelligence network for people who couldn't go through official channels. Elias sat at his desk and cracked his knuckles. Tell me what you know. Chuck gave him the basics. Victor's daughter, Isabella, 23 years old. Taken from her apartment 3 nights ago. No witnesses. Ransom demand of $5 million. Professional crew. Elias typed rapidly, pulling up databases that didn't officially exist. Isabella Salazar, University of Texas, communications major, no criminal record. Father is Victor Salazar, suspected ties to the Reynosa cartel but never charged. He pulled up a photo of Isabella. Dark hair, bright smile, the kind of girl who volunteered at animal shelters and posted sunset photos on Instagram. Elias frowned. This doesn't add up. If they wanted money from Victor, they'd take her in broad daylight. Send a message. Professional crews don't do apartment snatch and grabs. Too many variables. Chuck leaned forward. What are you saying? Elias pulled up another file. 3 similar abductions in the last 6 months. All daughters of cartel-adjacent businessmen. All professional jobs. All ransom demands paid. But here's the kicker. None of the girls came home. Chuck's blood went cold. Victor doesn't know this. Elias shook his head. The families were too scared to report it, and the crews are smart. They vary their methods, different cities, different demand amounts. But the pattern is there if you know where to look. So paying the ransom won't save her. Elias met his eyes. Paying the ransom gets her killed. They're not in this for the money. They're in it for something else. Human trafficking maybe, organ harvesting, or just leverage against the families. Either way, once they get paid, the girls disappear. Chuck drained his bourbon. Where are they holding her? Elias typed again. Based on cell tower pings and traffic cam footage, my best guess is an old industrial complex near Laredo. Used to be a meatpacking plant, abandoned for 10 years, but someone's been using the electricity. And there's been vehicle traffic at odd hours. Chuck stood. Send me the coordinates. Elias hesitated. Chuck, these guys are good. Ex-military, probably. You go in alone, you're not coming back. Chuck headed for the door. Then I better not go alone. He walked back to the truck where Victor was pacing nervously. Get in. We're going to Laredo. Victor's face lit up with hope. You found her. Chuck started the engine. Maybe. But we're not paying the ransom. Victor's hope turned to confusion. What? Chuck explained what Elias had found. The pattern, the missing girls. The likelihood that Isabella was already dead or soon would be. Victor's face went pale. He gripped the dashboard. So what do we do? Chuck's voice was iron. We go get her. The drive to Laredo took 3 hours. The sun set and the desert turned into a black void, punctuated by the occasional pair of headlights. Victor was silent, processing the reality that his money might not save his daughter. Chuck used the time to plan. The industrial complex was isolated, probably guarded, likely wired with cameras and motion sensors. A frontal assault was suicide, but ghosts don't use the front door. They arrived at the outskirts of Laredo just after 10 p.m. Chuck pulled off the highway and parked behind an abandoned gas station. He opened the lockbox in the bed of his truck. Inside was an arsenal. The Glock 19 he carried daily, a suppressed MPX submachine gun, flashbangs, zip ties, night vision goggles, a ballistic vest. He began gearing up. Victor watched in silence, his earlier bravado completely gone. What do you need me to do? Chuck chambered around in the Glock. Stay here. If I'm not back in 2 hours, call this number. He handed Victor a burner phone with a single contact saved. Elias will know what to do. Victor grabbed his arm. Please, bring her home. Chuck met his eyes. That's the plan. He disappeared into the darkness. The industrial complex was 2 miles east, through scrubland and dried creek beds. Chuck moved like smoke, using the terrain to stay invisible. The night vision goggles turned the world into shades of green. He could see the complex ahead, chain-link fence topped with razor wire. 2 guards at the main gate, another patrolling the perimeter, lights on in one of the buildings, vehicles parked outside, 3 black vans and a silver BMW. Chuck circled wide, looking for weaknesses. The back of the complex bordered an arroyo. The fence there was older, sections sagging where flash floods had eroded the ground. He approached low and slow. The guard on perimeter patrol was smoking a cigarette, his rifle slung carelessly over his shoulder. Chuck waited until the man's back was turned, then closed the distance in 5 seconds. A rear naked choke, applied correctly, renders someone unconscious in 8 to 10 seconds. This guard went limp in 6. Chuck zip-tied his hands and feet, gagged him with his own bandana, and dragged him into the shadows. He used bolt cutters from his pack to snip through the fence, creating a gap just large enough to slip through. Once inside, he moved toward the lit building. The windows were high and grimy, but he could see shadows moving inside. Voices carried on the still night air, Spanish and English mixed together. He couldn't make out the words, but the tone was relaxed, confident. These men thought they were untouchable. Chuck found a side door, locked. He pulled a tension wrench and pick from his vest. Lockpicking is a dying art in the age of bump keys and breaching charges, but Chuck had learned from an old thief in Saigon who could open a safe with a paperclip and a prayer. The lock clicked open in 30 seconds. He drew the suppressed MPX and entered. The hallway was dark and narrow, smelled like mildew and old blood. He moved toward the voices. They were coming from a large open room at the end of the hall. Chuck reached the doorway and peered around the corner. 5 men. 3 sitting at a table playing cards. 2 standing guard near a metal door on the far wall, all armed, AK pattern rifles, sidearms on their belts. These weren't street thugs. Their postures were disciplined, their weapons well maintained. Ex-military or cartel enforcers, maybe both. Chuck counted his rounds. 30 in the MPX Maggie, 15 in the Glock, against 5 targets in an enclosed space. Surprise was everything. He pulled a flashbang from his vest, pulled the pin, and tossed it into the room. The explosion was deafening even through his ear protection. The men screamed and clutched their faces. Chuck entered fast, the MPX shouldered and scanning for targets. 2 bursts, double-tap center mass. The first guard went down. The second turned and raised his rifle. Chuck put 3 rounds in his chest. The men at the table were scrambling, blinded and disoriented. One got his hands on his rifle. Chuck dropped him with a headshot. The other 2 surrendered, hands in the air. Chuck zip-tied them and secured their weapons. The metal door was locked from the outside. Chuck shot the lock and kicked it open. Inside was a small concrete room. 3 girls huddled in the corner. One of them was Isabella. She looked up at Chuck with wide, terrified eyes. "Are you here to kill us?" Chuck lowered his weapon. "I'm here to take you home." He led the girls out of the room. Isabella was shaking but unhurt. The other 2 were bruised and malnourished. Chuck handed them bottles of water from his pack. "Can you walk?" They nodded. "Good. Stay close and stay quiet." The complex was stirring now. Shouts echoed from other buildings. Headlights flared to life. The 2 guards at the main gate were running toward the sound of gunfire. Chuck moved the girls toward the rear fence, the route he'd entered by. They were halfway across the yard when the floodlights kicked on. The entire complex lit up like a prison yard. Chuck swore under his breath. A voice boomed over a PA system. "You are surrounded. Release the girls, and you will live." Chuck recognized the voice. Calm, professional, the kind of voice that had given orders before. He pushed the girls toward the fence. "Go. There's a gap in the fence near the arroyo. Follow it west until you reach a gas station. There's a man in a truck. Tell him Chuck sent you." Isabella grabbed his arm. "What about you?" Chuck reloaded the MPX. "I'll be right behind you." He wasn't. The moment the girls slipped through the fence, Chuck turned and opened fire on the approaching men. Suppressing fire, wide and aggressive. He wasn't trying to hit anyone. He was trying to buy time. The men scattered, taking cover behind vehicles and shipping containers. Chuck moved laterally, using the buildings for concealment. He'd fought in jungles and deserts and cities, but the rules were always the same. Keep moving, control the chaos, make them react to you. A man leaned out from behind a van and fired a burst from his AK. Rounds snapped past Chuck's head. He dropped to one knee and returned fire. The man went down. Chuck sprinted to the next piece of cover, a shipping container. Rounds pinged off the metal like hail. His MPX was empty. He dropped the mag and reloaded, his hands moving on autopilot. A shadow moved to his left. Chuck spun and put 2 rounds in the man's chest before his brain even registered the target. The man crumpled. Chuck's radio crackled. He'd taken it off one of the guards. A voice spoke in Spanish. "He's alone. Cut him off at the north fence." Chuck smiled grimly. They thought he was running. Good. Let them think that. He doubled back toward the main building, the last place they'd expect him to be. He entered through a side door and moved through the dark interior. Found a staircase leading to the 2nd floor, climbed it. At the top was an office with a window overlooking the yard. He could see the men converging on the north fence. Idiots. He set up at the window and opened fire. 3 round bursts, precise, methodical. 2 men dropped before they realized where the shots were coming from. The rest scattered. Chuck moved to a different window and engaged from a new angle. This was the advantage of high ground. They had to come to him. And when they did, he'd be waiting. One of the men got smart and lobbed a grenade. It arced through the air and crashed through the window. Chuck grabbed it mid-bounce and threw it back out. It exploded in mid-air, shrapnel tearing through the men below. The screams were brief. Chuck descended the stairs and moved back outside. The yard was littered with bodies now. The floodlights cast harsh shadows. His ears were ringing from the explosions. He counted the living. 2 men left that he could see. One was wounded, dragging himself toward a van. The other was the voice from the PA. He stepped out from behind a building, hands raised. Enough! You win. Chuck kept the MPX trained on him. Where's your boss? The man smiled. I am the boss. Chuck studied him. Late 40s, fit, military bearing, a faded Ranger tab tattoo on his forearm. You're US military, the man shrugged. Was. Turns out Uncle Sam doesn't pay as well as the cartels. What do you want? A name. Chuck's finger tensed on the trigger. Who hired you to take those girls? The man hesitated. Chuck shot him in the leg. The man screamed and fell. Chuck walked closer. I won't ask again. The man gasped through the pain. Reynosa, the Reynosa cartel. They're using the girls as leverage against rivals. The families pay, the cartel gets funded, and the girls. He trailed off. Chuck finished the sentence. The girls disappear. The man nodded, blood pooling beneath him. And Victor Salazar? The man laughed bitterly. Victor's no saint. He used to work with Reynosa before he went independent. This was payback. They were going to kill his daughter regardless. Chuck raised the MPX. Then you should have picked a different line of work. He pulled the trigger. The silence that followed was profound. Chuck ejected the spent mag and pocketed it. Brass left behind was evidence. He moved through the complex methodically, checking bodies and collecting intel. Phones. Ledgers. Anything that might connect this operation to the larger network. He found a laptop in the office, took it. Then he slipped back through the fence and disappeared into the desert. By the time the authorities arrived, he was 20 miles away. Victor was waiting at the gas station with the girls. Isabella ran to him, sobbing. Victor held her tight, tears streaming down his face. He looked at Chuck over her shoulder. His eyes said everything words couldn't. Thank you. Chuck nodded. Get them somewhere safe. And Victor, stay out of the life. If Reynosa wanted you, they'll try again. Victor's face hardened. I will protect my family, whatever it takes. Chuck climbed into his truck. That's what I'm counting on. He drove through the night, the desert stretching endlessly on both sides. The adrenaline was fading now, replaced by the familiar ache in his joints and the exhaustion that came after every fight. He thought about the girls, Isabella and the others. They'd have nightmares for years, therapy bills, trust issues, but they were alive. That had to count for something. His phone buzzed. A text from Elias. Heard you made some noise in Laredo. Chuck typed back. Just taking out the trash. Elias responded. The feds are asking questions, might want to lay low. Chuck smiled. I'm always low. He pulled into his driveway as the sun was rising. His house was small and unremarkable, single-story ranch, gravel driveway, a flag hanging from the porch. He unloaded his gear and locked it back in the safe. Then he showered, washing the desert and the blood away. By 8 a.m. he was back at Garcia's gym. Maria looked up from the front desk, surprised. Chuck, I thought you'd take a day off after yesterday. Chuck grabbed his gym bag. Can't, I've got 3 more sets to finish. He walked into the weight room. The college kids were back on the ellipticals. The old-timers nodded at him. The bench press station was empty. Chuck loaded the bar. 315 pounds, same as yesterday. He lay back and gripped the bar. The weight felt good, honest. He pressed it up and down, controlled, precise. Outside, the Texas sun climbed higher. Somewhere, men were plotting violence. Somewhere, girls were being taken. Somewhere, bullies were learning hard lessons. But here, in this moment, there was just the iron and the breath, and the silent promise that some men, some ghosts, never really retire. They just wait. Have you ever walked into a situation where the odds were stacked against you? Drop a comment if you've ever had to stand your ground when everyone told you to back down. Because that's the thing about legends. They're not born. They're forged in the heat of moments when quitting would have been easier. Chuck racked the weight and sat up. The gym hummed around him. Life went on. And so did he.